I prepared some notes, and I always get nervous when I've got my notes because I think I'm going to be too emotional to be able to even read them. So I'm just going to speak from the heart here. My name is Bobby Arbess, and I'm a veteran rainforest activist and direct action organizer from the early war in the woods in the 1990s, and I'm a founding member of the Rainforest Flying Squad. And I am here today with you all to stand in solidarity with our brothers and our sisters and our two-spirit relatives who have held strong over 8 months on the Fairy Creek Ancient Forest front lines. This is likely the longest standing consecutive act of direct action for the ancient temperate rainforests in the settler history of struggle to stop clear-cut logging on this island. It comes at a moment of acute crisis, socially, economically, and ecologically, as we hang on the precipice of a global climate crisis that threatens to further destabilize civilization as we know it, in which every single ecosystem on the planet is in a state of decline, and where the future of our own children is hanging in the balance. We are guardians of an ecosystem that plays more significance in balancing and buffering from runaway climate change than possibly any ecosystem on Earth, and that is the ancient temperate rainforest of so-called British Columbia. The industrial status quo has been to completely eliminate the ancient temperate rainforest, an ecosystem that has evolved relatively undisturbed since the last ice age, over 10,000 years in the making, that contains more plant biomass than any ecosystem on Earth, that grows perhaps the largest, most magnificent trees than perhaps any forest on Earth. And it has been treated as nothing but a source of timber supply. It is that industrial paradigm that the government's own two-panel committee identified as which is need of urgent paradigm shift, as they called it. It is no longer acceptable to view these ancient forest ecosystems as nothing but a source of timber supply. For 30 years, the environmental movement had to apologize for every single little park that what we were advocating for protection, because the industry would say, oh, you're taking away from our timber supply. But never once was it considered by government, by industry, by society, the colossal injustice of treating an ecosystem as nothing but a source of timber supply. And so today, we're here to say that the road stops here. That if we are going to successfully make the epic social transformation that is required for us to provide a sustainable and livable future for our children, that the industrial paradigm that views nature as nothing but a source of resource extraction has got to stop now. We are not the first ones to say this. That this paradigm that was brought here by European settlers was resisted from first contact by indigenous peoples on every single territory on so-called North America. So we, as more privileged settlers advocating in the last minute to midnight in the struggle to protect these ancient forests, we are following a long and beautiful tradition of indigenous resistance in defense of the land. And we take that responsibility to heart because we recognize how our very existence on stolen land has been interconnected with a system of genocide on indigenous peoples. And that one of the things that we can do for reconciliation and to heal the wounds of genocide on these lands is to step up and defend the last of the native ecosystems that are at risk of destruction. And I know how much each and every one of us takes that responsibility seriously. And so this is a humbling moment where we ask our government to stop using UNDRIP, to stop invoking reconciliation to justify the capital colonial status quo that is threatening to destroy the last of the ancient temperate rainforests. You ever notice how government will always side with First Nations when they have been brought to the point of signing mutual revenue sharing agreements with industry? But as soon as First Nations people stand up to disrupt the status quo, they're met with RCMP guns like they were at Wet'suwet'en. I want to give a big shout out to our dear and beloved elder, Pacheedaht First Nations elder Bill Jones, who unfortunately cannot be here today because he had to go to the hospital in the middle of the night. Bill Jones has been the heart of this movement. He has stepped out of his comfort zone to break the silence that is imposed on First Nations communities as part of the revenue sharing process agreement, where community members and Indigenous communities are not allowed to speak out if their elected leadership has signed deals with industry and government. Bill Jones is a man of courage. He is a man of principle. He is a man of love and kindness for everybody he meets. And we are super grateful that he has welcomed us, all of us, with open arms to help defend the last ancient forests on Pacheedaht territory. So I wanted you all now just to put out some prayers for Bill today, for his health, for his wellness, so that we could continue to walk this path together to defend the last ancient forests on Pacheedaht territory, at Fairy Creek, on Edinburgh Mountain, in the Walburn Valley, in the Bugaboo Valley, and the other 9 locations where the Rainforest Flying Squad has established front-line blockades to stop the destruction on that territory. I want to thank the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteer labor that has been put in by the Rainforest Flying Squad Organizing Collective, of which I am a part, of all the people who have been rallying all week, showing up at the courthouse and establishing vigils and getting out in front of our MLA offices and letting the government know this is a crisis. We can't wait 3 years. The forests don't have 3 years left. There is approximately 415,000 hectares of productive old-growth forest left in British Columbia. The government allows the logging of 150,000 hectares of old-growth forest in British Columbia per year. Here on the island, that is the equivalent of 34 soccer fields of old-growth logging per day. Within 3 years, it will all be gone. So when we hear John Horgan and Minister Katrine Conroy telling us that, oh, you know, we're just going to bring everybody together, we all need to have a conversation, we're going to do this in 3 years, we're going to deliver an old-growth forest policy into legislation, we know that is BS, because in 3 years, there won't be anything left to protect, full stop. That's the truth. So thank you all for stepping up to participate in this vibrant grassroots direct action movement, because we needed to do that. On August 10th, we went up to the ridge 3,000 feet above sea level, and we set up our tents at the base of these massive earth-moving excavators to prevent road building into the headwater of the unlogged Fairy Creek watershed the very next day. We thought that it would be over in 3 days, that they would serve a court injunction on us, we would make a little bit of noise, we would point the finger at John Horgan, you know, to protect the last unlogged watershed in his own electoral backyard. We didn't know that we would still be here 8 months later. You know, Teal Jones having trouble getting an injunction on us. They waited 7 months. They got into court. They presented 1,400 pages of affidavit material. I bet you half of it was my own personal Facebook posts. You know, the judge said, hey, you know, we're not necessarily going to like prejudice towards your interests here. We're going to kind of look at both sides here. That was kind of encouraging. Because we know the colonial court typically only considers the harm to corporate economic interests. When Teal Jones presented their application for a court injunction, they said, you know, it's going to hurt us far more than it's going to hurt the people on the blockades, you know, if you don't give us the injunction. They never talked once about the harm on the ancient forest ecosystems, which to them don't even exist because, again, it's a paradigm problem. All they see is the forest for the timber. That's it, okay? But we are here to put the brakes on old growth logging once and for all, to end the toxic legacy of colonial resource extractive violence on the land. To uphold the leadership of Pacheedaht Elder Bill Jones, Pacheedaht Council Member Roxy Jones, and the new hereditary chief who's just stepped up, young 18-year-old Victor Peters from the Pacheedaht Nation. "27 years ago, we were on the Walburn Valley blockades. We stopped 13 kilometers of road building in one summer, and that led to the creation of Carmanah-Walburn Provincial Park. Leaders of the IWA, the union representing forest workers from Renfrew, from Alberni, and from Duncan, they came to us. They said, we need to talk. We need to sit down, and we need to find common ground. 12 hours later, from a union office in Duncan, the people who are on the front lines in the Walburn, all the major environmental NGOs, we stomped out an agreement that identified that corporate greed, the corporate bottom line, is the enemy to both forests and forest workers. In 1993, IWA presidents were telling us there was no need to continue logging old-growth forests. There was enough of a wood base on the 90% of the land that had already been logged that was growing tree plantations to keep people sustainably employed in local communities indefinitely. We need for the government to transition now to a sustainable second growth forestry model with value-added manufacturing, where First Nations communities have control over their resource base, and which provides sustainable jobs and protects the loss of the ancient forest forever. Thank you very much.